Good afternoon, bon après-midi, welcome and bienvenue to National Managers Community Virtual Talks for Thursday, June 25th. Je suis Marilyn Lutzel, NMC Regional Manager for Ontario. S'il vous plaît, notez que notre événement est enregistré. Please note that our event today will be recorded and that you will be receiving a YouTube video link following the event. We ask that there are a few housekeeping notes to keep in mind. The first, please ensure that your microphone is muted, also that your camera is off. And for many, when you log off from VPN, you will experience a better viewing experience for our call today. As you know, Virtual Talks is one of the many ways that the NMC is connecting with our managers from coast to coast to coast. We launched the program at the beginning of May, and we've brought many important topics to the community, including today, which I'm thrilled to announce. We are presenting Failures That Bloom with our fearless NMC DM champion leader, Christine Donoghue. Without further ado, I will pass the baton to our colleague Jonathan, who will introduce our session and launch the event. Jonathan, over to you.
Bonjour, merci Marilyn. Bonjour Christine. Good morning for those of you who are joining in the West et bon après-midi à ceux pour l'Est du Canada. Encore, comme Marilyn a mentionné, pour les gens qui ne l'ont pas fait, peut-être vous mettre en sourdine et puis éteindre votre caméra pour assurer une meilleure communication. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the NMC Managers Connect virtual talks focusing on failures that bloom. Keep in mind, this is a bilingual session. Nous nous invitons à vous sentir libre de poser les questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. So as per the description, these talks are made to break the stigma on failures are bad and should be hidden. Instead, we can all learn and grow from those mistakes. To get the series started, we decided to invite, as Marilyn mentioned, Mme Christine Donoghue, the NMC DM Championne. Bonjour, Mme Donoghue. Merci d'avoir accepté de participer à ce premier événement de la série sur les échecs qui épanouissent.
Salut, Jonathan. Bonjour. Ça me fait énormément plaisir d'être avec vous autres. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us at the NMC.
Parfait. Donc, au cours de cette session, j'aimerais ça qu'on puisse discuter sur un événement au cours de votre carrière où vous ayez failli. Et puis, un défi que vous avez vécu. Puis donc, si vous en avez un, si vous pouviez nous le raconter.
See, Jonathan, I was asking myself that question as to why I was invited because I've actually never failed in my career. No, honestly, I think part of it is to actually be extremely self-aware about those failures. And I have basically encountered failures in the course of my career. And the one that I wanted to share with everybody today is one that I particularly felt frustrated about. C'était à un moment donné dans ma carrière, j'étais sous-ministre adjointe et je travaillais pour faire beaucoup de choses en matière d'innovation. Et puis j'avais soumis à mon sous-ministre un plan d'action extraordinaire à mon sens, an extraordinary plan to actually open a government lab. Is something that I'd seen in other countries, that I had basically seen in private sector. So I had designed with the team a complete government lab where we would actually be able to experiment across government on finding solutions to complex issues, to try to think outside the box on how we could do things differently. And so it was something that I was very passionate about and very excited about. And fundamentally, it just fell flat. Just totally fell flat. So it just basically had no traction, and the deputy just said, thank you very much, and just put it aside, and it never resurfaced. So it was, as I said, a bit of a frustrating experience.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for opening up to us today on a difficult event such as this one. From that event on that plan that failed and never got the traction that you were expecting. So today, many years from that situation. So if you go back in time, what was your first thoughts? You know, did you think that your career was limited or even somewhat over, you know, based on from that
Well,
experience?
you know what? It's kind of like strange because as I indicated, I felt frustrated because I thought it was a really good idea, which fundamentally it was a good idea. I didn't think that my career was over, but what I did question is whether I had my place in the public service, where there didn't seem to be openness to these types of ideas. But what I realized, because when you're facing a failure, you at a certain point have to take back. Donc j'ai pris un certain recul puis je me suis mis à me demander pourquoi que l'enthousiasme n'avait pas été au même niveau que le mien. Et ce que j'ai réalisé, c'est des fois, il faut regarder notre situation and think about, is this the right timing? So I'd never stopped and thought whether or not this was right timing. And fundamentally, it was during the draft year. So probably not, in fact, the right time to basically come with a brand new innovation idea. And I should not have assumed that how I was feeling about the initiative would be how the deputy would feel about it. So I made an assumption that it was going to be like the greatest idea, and I should not have assumed, which means that I should have checked signals before having basically put forward the proposal. I should have checked signals. I should have basically see if there was some signals to that effect, how would I build the momentum? And how would I go back and incrementally verify whether or not I was heading in the right direction and whether or not there was appetite for the initiative, and potentially seek some partners where we could have built this on a collective basis. So, but my frustration initially was that this was a missed opportunity, that the government was not being innovative, although it was talking about innovation. But sometimes you also have to stop and think. And, and today, what I've learned is that never lose sight of your good idea, because that timing, that moment may come back. So those are some of the things that I saw in the context of my career today. And so now I check signals. I kind of like basically come forward and put a bit of a conversation forward before I leap in and do all the work and realize that it's not work that is warranted. But like I said, today, as you know, there are innovation labs in about just every department. So I may have been a little ahead of my time, but the idea did get some traction later on, and I was able to pull out that seed of innovations and be able to influence in other areas on that idea.
Perfect, thank you. So today, looking back at that experience, would you say that it has changed the way you do your analysis before you get onto a project?
Oui. Donc, comme je dis, c'est une question de vraiment comprendre, parce que nous, des fois, on a une vision d'une situation qui est peut-être plus limitée. Puis ce que j'ai appris à faire, c'est de prendre un recul et de regarder le plus grand portrait. De dire, est-ce que c'est le moment propice? Parce que l'idée n'est jamais mauvaise. Les nouvelles idées, c'est jamais mauvais. Mais il faut savoir s'il y a de l'appétit. Est-ce que c'est le bon moment? Est-ce que ça pourrait être effectivement une idée semblable, mais à un différent échelon? C'est peut-être trop une grosse idée, c'est peut-être quelque chose qu'on peut adapter. Fait qu'il faut savoir adapter au contexte dans lequel on se trouve pour dire qu'effectivement, il y a un moment propice. J'entends souvent des gestionnaires qui me disent, Christine, there's never any openness for my ideas. I can't get people to want to do some new stuff. But sometimes it may not be that it's that the idea isn't good. It just may not be the opportune time. There may be competing priorities that are there. There may be a question of funding. So you have to basically take a step back and go check those signals before you launch into something. And then adapt, adjust, or just put it on the back burner for when the timing may be better. And so these are things that I've learned to do, and to just basically, and then start slowly and progressively continue to nurture that idea by putting in some bits and pieces slowly until people see that, wow, that may be a good idea. So plant some evidence, put some ideas, plant the seed, let it grow. So those are things, but never assume that because somebody says no, that the idea will never take fruition at a certain point. Fait que ça, c'est important, c'est de reconnaître le contexte et l'environnement dans lequel on est. Et des fois, c'est peut-être juste le timing et puis le moment propice. So what that gave me as a manager, Jonathan, is to, as a senior leader, when I see people that are getting excited about ideas, what I try to do is basically make very sure that they understand the expectations that we have in what needs to be delivered and what needs to be done. So that if they want to go off with an idea, that they understand what are the limitations, if any, and what are the opportunities. So those are things that I discuss with teams quite a bit to basically ensure that they don't get frustrated or that they're not disappointed, but basically say, okay, let's start incrementally. And I've learned that working incrementally can sometimes bring you to that endpoint that you were seeking initially. And so that gets you to maybe a little slower, but it'll get you to where you want to be. So those are things that I've learned. And the other thing that is important is sometimes in failure, it's better to fail early and fail small. So that's why I say test your ideas.
Okay. So would you say that would be a recommendation you would do for to the managers who are looking to get into the executive ranks to fail early, and if they have to fail early in the projects?
I would say that if you're doing that, it's always a good thing, but to always be self-aware and to be able to explain why there could have been a failure, or to basically what you've learned out of that failure. Because through these failures, and you hear a lot of people say, in every failure, there's a lesson learned. There's an opportunity to grow. And the biggest growth that I've made is my self-awareness, is to understand that not everything revolves around my ideas. And there are competing ideas out there. And there is a proper time for things. And to actually build a partnership and to see where you can put a hook in the context of a different idea. So when you're looking into becoming an executive, I think it's very, very important that from what you've learned from failures, that you're able to guide your teams, that you're able to basically help them manage that context, and to be able to say, how do you prepare for it? And how do you basically, like I said, check early signals? Because I think that sometimes we make assumptions, and, you know, there's a theory that says that every assumption should be tested before you move forward. So do test your assumptions before you put forward, but never lose hope, never lose, and sometimes, and then watch for those opportunities, because that door may open one day for that idea to be able to come in. So those are like things that I would basically bring forward to groups. And if I was basically entering into the management rank, into the EX rank right now, I would not be afraid to talk about where I failed, what I've learned from it, how I got back on my feet, and how I would basically be able to instruct my teams, comment travailler avec mon équipe, comment leur dire que c'est correct de pas toujours réussir, mais de jamais perdre de vue les leçons qu'on a apprises de ces échecs-là.
Parfait. Sorry. Donc, en rétrospect, est-ce qu'on pourrait dire que cet événement dont vous nous avez parlé initialement a eu un impact sur vos décisions futures en tant que haute gestionnaire à la fonction publique du Canada?
Ça a eu un impact, définitivement, dans le sens que comme gestionnaire, c'est de toujours vouloir avoir l'esprit ouvert pour essayer d'encourager les nouvelles idées, mais comme je disais tantôt, toujours en donnant le contexte dans lequel on opère pour voir à quel moment les nouvelles idées ou les initiatives devraient continuer. Tout ça pour dire, c'est que ça ne m'a pas découragée de continuer à vouloir avancer d'une façon nouvelle. Ce que j'ai appris aussi, c'est que des fois, il faut prendre des chances. J'aurais voulu, moi, à ce moment-là, que le sous-ministre prenne une chance puis qu'il décide d'être le premier à lancer cette innovation-là d'un laboratoire. Ça n'a pas été le cas. Mais des fois, je me dis, quand quelqu'un me soumet une nouvelle idée, j'essaie de voir c'est quoi l'opportunité, puis dans quel contexte je peux le placer dans un plus grand environnement, où je leur dis, OK, écoute, on va s'essayer à plus petite échelle. So let's try to do a smaller experiment with it and then see whether or not we can create some momentum in order to not discourage people from being innovative or thinking that innovation is not possible. And so sometimes, and I've become very, very attached to the notion of experimentation, which is basically the concept of position yourself to fail small and fail early if you start an experimentation. But what you do is you document that experimentation. You document it so that you can pull out of it, do the critical analysis, and pull out of it the really good points that you can reuse and get rid of the things that may not have been ready for full performance. So that's what is important. And so by doing that, you encourage people to want to change, to want to evolve, and to always want to better and not take status quo as the end point. And so for me, I encourage people to always tell me it's not because we've always done it this way that it necessarily has to be. So I keep an open mind, I listen, and then sometimes I'll say, you know what, really good idea, maybe not the right time, but don't lose sight of it. Continue to work on it. Look at the context, look at the bigger picture. And so those are things that I think that I continue to want to be a senior manager with an open mind. So.
Wow. Merci beaucoup pour tous ces conseils. Je suis certain que les gestionnaires en ligne sachent apprécier beaucoup ces informations puis ces conseils de votre part. So this is it for the discussion. At this time, I'd like to ask Marilyn if we have any questions from the participants on the chat line. Donc, tel que mentionné au début, vous pouvez poser vos questions dans la langue de votre choix. Feel free to ask your question in the official language of your choice. Awesome. Marilyn, do we have any questions for Mme Donoghue?
Absolutely, we have questions. Christine, thank you for sharing your personal experience. Very insightful. I found especially how you mentioned you had this passion towards this idea, and it was the passion that was driving you, and how you had to pull that back a little bit to say, okay, hold on, I got to put my checks in place, and maybe slow down that flame that I'm burning and keep it going for later. And I think that's triggered some questions from our group. The one thing you mentioned was self-awareness was really important. That also connects to an earlier talk we had on mindfulness and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. One of the questions was, how can we develop more self-awareness as leaders?
You know what? You develop self-awareness when you realize that things that you don't think are going as you expected, and when you take a step back and say, why? Why did it not go as I wanted? Why was it this? Why was something criticized? Why? I think this notion of why is really crucial, and don't be defensive about those why. Try to go to the root cause and really fully understand. And if you don't understand, don't hesitate to ask why to the person who's basically interacted with you, and have them explain to you. And that will bring you to a point where you say, okay, I hear. And don't become defensive immediately, but do try to analyze what it means so that you can actually learn. And I think it's through that learning that you learn what self-awareness is. Because sometimes maybe you came across to something, an idea, too aggressively. Maybe it seemed good to you, but you didn't really understand the context. So there's and maybe the person, like the deputy, had really good reasons to say no at that time. So you need to understand that. And that basically becomes a little bit of how you become self-aware of not only yourself, but self-aware of yourself in the environment under which you're operating as well. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Absolutely. You're speaking a little bit about something called metacognition, right? When we take a step back, we're looking in and saying, okay, here's how I'm reacting. This is how it's affecting me. And it's okay. This didn't work, but maybe we can come back to it later, right? So that looking into yourself piece of the self-awareness.
And the other important thing, Marilyn, find yourself, you have your network. You always have the people who are willing to listen to you. Because as I was saying, I felt frustrated a little bit. But having people that I knew I could trust and just go vent, and and some of them were basically saying like, but Christine, understand, it was dropped. Like everybody's not investing in these new things. Everybody's trying to feel, how do you cut back? So it puts, sometimes having a friend or and even do a dry run with these people, say, what do you think? And so it brings it makes you a lot more self-aware in that context by having that security, that confidence in people in your network that you can actually go talk to.
Absolutely. Sometimes your best friends put up the mirror and you can gently see what you missed before.
That's right.
Another question that's come through. One director has mentioned that it's okay to have failures. If 100% of ideas succeeded, we're not pushing the boundaries. Would you agree or disagree with this statement?
I would agree. And that's why we talked about having 1,000 failures bloom. Because basically what it means is that it's the learning and it's the pushing. And if we never dared to put ideas forward, it would be the constant status quo. Puis il n'y a rien de plus plate que de toujours faire la même chose, la même routine. C'est souvent dans ces découvertes-là, dans ces façons de faire-là, c'est d'oser proposer, puis de voir des fois, il y a des petits éléments qui viennent en place et ça change. Puis je pense qu'on devient de plus en plus ouvert dans la fonction publique au changement. Et si je me fie à ce qui s'est passé dans le contexte de la COVID, dans ma propre expérience avec le ministère du Revenu, on a osé aller au-delà de notre capacité ou de notre façon de faire habituelle et on a découvert plein de choses qu'on n'était même pas sûr qu'on savait faire ou qu'on voulait faire. Et on a réalisé qu'on était capable de prendre des risques avertis, des risques instruits et qu'on était capable d'aller au-delà de ce qu'on avait fait dans le passé. Et vous dire l'excitation que ça crée au sein de l'organisation, de penser qu'on est capable de réaliser ça. Et là, ce qu'il faut faire, le plus gros défi pour nous, c'est de maintenir cette avancée and to not snap back to what it used to be. It's to continue to progress. And I think that Canadians have expectations from public servants and their government that we're going to be able to adapt quickly, to react quickly, and to actually be much more proactive in a lot of ways.
Excellent. Thank you. Second question's come in. It'll be in French. Please excuse if my pronunciation is not perfect. I am not at level C just yet. We are working on it. OK. D'après mon expérience, il me semble que les erreurs qui se situaient à l'intérieur d'un écart type, one standard deviation, sont acceptables. Toutefois, des erreurs au-delà de ce seuil demandent beaucoup d'efforts pour surmonter. Cette observation est-elle exacte? Si oui, quelles sont les implications?
Mon Dieu, c'est une question un peu complexe. Je dirais que oui, c'est exact. Puis je pense que, par contre, l'écart, ce gap-là qui se crée, se raccourcit avec le temps à mesure où on devient plus apte et plus habile de pratiquer les erreurs, d'apprendre des erreurs, parce que dans le passé, les erreurs, on n'en parlait pas. les erreurs n'étaient pas acceptées. Les erreurs, c'était vu comme une incompétence. Il y a des erreurs crasses qui peuvent avoir lieu, qui sont effectivement dues à de l'incompétence. Mais il y a des erreurs dans lesquelles c'était avec un but viable et un but qui, au fait, était complètement valable. Et je pense que dans ce contexte-là, c'est là qu'on reconnaît que des fois, il faut essayer. Que des fois, ça vaut la peine de pousser l'enveloppe et d'essayer d'aller plus loin parce que c'est comme ça qu'on voit ce qu'on est capable de faire. Ça ne réussit pas toujours, puis des fois, ça réussit partiellement. Mais je pense que plus ça va et plus il y a une ouverture et que ce sont des erreurs, que je dis des erreurs intelligentes, où on a pris le temps de préparer, où on a pris le temps d'analyser et qu'on a pris le temps d'essayer de mitiger nos erreurs, mitiger les risques, mais qu'en même temps qu'on a mis les bons contrôles pour pouvoir les expliquer, à ce moment-là, c'est une erreur qui est tout à fait acceptable dans la mesure où on est capable d'en faire une leçon en même temps.
Thank you. I think that's true, Christine. There is probably a shift in attitude towards failures, right? It used to be taboo, I think, when I probably first started with government.
Yep.
And no one talked about those mistakes and we were almost embarrassed. But I think the mindset has been where it's okay to be vulnerable once in a while and to show that we're imperfect. So that shift may have also created this now new mindset of failures can bloom, right?
Yeah.
We can learn from them and we can all move forward.
And there's nothing better, Marilyn, just to build on what you're saying,
Yeah.
for an executive, a senior leader, to demonstrate that vulnerability.
Yes.
Because what it does, it brings you closer to the people that you work with because it just makes you human. Because I don't know any senior leader who has basically never committed a mistake or never failed in anything. We all have. It's human nature. Yes. But to be able to admit it, to show that vulnerability, but demonstrate that you can also accept and learn from it is a big step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes for an ideal role model and a mentor. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Another comment, a Chinese saying, failure is the mother of success.
Mm-hmm.
Any towards that?
I like that because the way I see it, and that's why it's important to take the step back and review your failure, because when you start digging into it, you will find that perfect seed, the seed that you say, oh, had I known, I would have cultivated that seed better. And then you can take it with you. And when the proper environment, the proper timing arrives, you take that seed out and you plant it, and that will give you success. Not only that, but when you're in a track and you see that you're going to fail, if you're cognizant about the potential failure and you take the time to think about it, you can course correct. And that course correction in itself can lead you to success as well. So that's why we should not be afraid to fail, but we should always monitor our pace and not assume the end point as being the right one. And course correction is something that we should do. That's why I have a hard time when somebody says, Christine, I want a plan how we're going to do it from A to Z. And it's because it's like, well, because there may be A.1, A.2. We may want to change course. I like to work on an incremental basis where I say, okay, let's go from one point to another. Let's reassess and let's say, are we still on track? Have we learned different things? And do we need to course correct or reposition and then continue to move on? And sometimes on that track, you realize saying, holy crap, this is not good at all. So you're better off in pulling out as opposed to continue to spend and continue to invest time and people's effort to something that you know is not the right thing to do.
I love that nugget of information, course correction. I'm going to actually put that in my kid's room. Right? I feel like sometimes kids have so much pressure on them. It's okay. We can course correct this.
That's right.
It's a concept you could use at home and at work, right? It's a valuable nugget.
That's right. Exactly. And we shouldn't be afraid of it.
We shouldn't be afraid of it. And just to echo comments from the chat room, the concept of course correction is a great takeaway. So thank you, Christine. That was awesome. We have one more question. In situations of failure, what would be some tips or approaches a leader can take to communicate that failure, to communicate the experience they have from living through that failure with their team and their fellow colleagues?
I think the approach is total honesty. Don't try to window dress it. Don't try to finger point somebody else, and don't try to say, just basically, and that comes back to that self-awareness, right? And just basically, but also come back with the advice. If you had to do it over, what would you do? It means that you've actually taken the time to reflect on it and that you've learned from it. And basically through that learning, you can also say to others, I've learned, I've grown, I've failed. It's okay for you to do it too. And be clear, though, that you're not going to judge people who fail. Because being able to, that's part of that self-awareness. If you failed, others can too. So recognize that. Help them, but help them in basically saying, okay, maybe it didn't go the way you wanted to, but what did you get out of it? Sometimes you say, well, I should have worked more closely with other colleagues. I should have gone and do things. And those are things that if you become and you set them up and you do the analysis, when you set up your next plan, your next thinking, you will think about doing those things. And so I think that's why it's important to share these experiences so that people think about these things and you learn from them. And and I think honesty brings the empathy that you will need for people who you will be guiding, and you may be guiding them towards a failure. And if it's a team failure, have the time, discuss it, laugh about it, because sometimes it's just very funny. Not everything is dramatic, but also say, okay, now how do we pick up and how do we move forward? Because it's always about getting up and moving forward.
Yes, and humor always works, right? Humor always works to lighten it and make people feel less vulnerable because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So a question from a manager who's from a science background.
Okay.
Thanks, Christine, for sharing your experience and answering our following questions. In science, we always encourage to publish the negative results so that others don't repeat and use the negative results to formulate new theories.
And that is so true. And I think that we could learn so much more from people in science, from the way that they behave about sharing that type of knowledge. And because we fail in policy, and I think more and more we're starting to basically say lessons learned, and I know that I instituted in certain jobs that I had, after certain projects, the lessons learned, even for projects that did not move forward or did not achieve their results, it was so that why did we not get there? What happened? Was there something negative or was it something that we didn't plan? Or that we didn't expect. So by sharing those, what you're doing is allowing others to learn from your mistake and to potentially course correct even before they get to that point. And that is something that we should learn more from science. And I think science has a lot of opportunities to show us, and bridging the science and policy and sharing those approaches is probably something that we don't do as much as we could. But we could definitely learn a lot more from each other.
Oh.
Yep.
Did we lose Marilyn?
If we haven't lost her, she's very calm and poised.
Yeah. No, looks like she's back.
You guys, I don't know what just happened here. I promise I got rid of the entire family. There's nobody screaming, but the screen went blank.
But we hear you well.
Okay. Can you see me at all or not at all?
Yeah.
Oh, you can. Okay. Well, it actually happened at a perfect time because we are wrapping up, Christine.
Yes.
And what I'd like to do is pass it back to my colleague Jonathan for closing remarks.
Merci, Marilyn. Alors, Christine, merci beaucoup d'avoir participé à cet événement, le premier événement de la série sur les échecs qui épanouissent, puis aussi d'avoir fait réaliser aux gens le côté positif des échecs et puis comment ça peut être une bonne chose pour le futur de la carrière de tout le monde. Puis d'arrêter pour essayer de casser la stigmatisation que les échecs doivent être cachés et puis que les échecs sont négatifs. Donc, merci encore une fois pour vous être ouverte à nous puis nous donner tous ces commentaires puis avoir fait des gestionnaires, des gens mieux équipés pour leur futur. And,
J'allais juste dire merci beaucoup, Jonathan. Puis, mot de la fin de ma part, c'est n'oubliez pas que les échecs qui sont vécus dans les ministères ne viennent pas toujours de la base. Des fois, ils viennent de la haute gestion aussi. Ça nous arrive aussi de faire des erreurs.
Effectivement. Merci beaucoup. And thank you, Marilyn, and all the NMC team for making this event happen. It was flawless as usual. So thank you again, Marilyn. And I'll let you go on for the final words.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Christine. A fabulous, fabulous virtual talk. So many insightful comments, nuggets of information that our chat group and managers are leaving today with and being very thankful for. So thank you, Jonathan, for the excellent topic, Christine, for shedding light on it and bringing it to life for us. I want to thank all of our viewers. Stay tuned. We will offer another session next week, same time, same place. Our topic next Thursday, July 2nd, the Office of the Chief Human Resource Officer has a discussion on the topic of managers managing people, and they would like to present the results of their survey. So stay tuned for that topic. You feel free to register via our Twitter handle at the NMC_CNG. All updates and registration details will be found there. And for participants, within the coming days, you will be receiving the YouTube video link. And with that, have a very, very pleasant afternoon. Bon après-midi.
Merci. Bye tout le monde.
Bye.